New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello and good morning. Welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Allie Benjamin, and it is my great joy to be here today. I'm actually broadcasting live from you probably noticed the background's a little different. I am here in one of my old hometowns, Big Bear Lake, California, and it's beautiful. I wish you could see the blue skies and all the amazing pine trees and the mountains around me. It truly is a beautiful morning, and I hope it is wherever you are. My guest today is coming in from a whole different country altogether. We'll get to that in a moment. If you're here for the first time, I'm so glad that you're here. We have soul-centered individuals, and we have conversations, deep dives into the work they're doing. These individuals, my guests, they channel their time, talent, energy, resources, their love, their creativity into doing good work in the world. And each of them have their own unique way of doing that. And that's what really intrigues me and inspires me to do this show. It's called The Growing Edge because here we are right now at the green growing edge of our own becoming, our evolutionary edge. And because we're always growing, we're always changing, we're always becoming, that's what I'm excited about exploring. And so today, my guest is the amazing Jim Lockard. He's back for the second time as a guest on this show. And there he is, broadcasting live from Lyon, France. And Jim he's an ordained minister, teacher. He's a speaker, author, blogger, coach, consultant, and thought leader. And as I said, he's here for the second time. Last time we really had a deep dive into him and his background, his upbringing, and why he's interested in the things he's doing in the world. So if you'd like to catch that show, and I encourage you to go back and look for that, you'll find out about his background. Today, we are going to talk about the work he's doing now. And he has a blog, which I've just had the absolute joy reading and listening to over the last few days. It's New Thought Evolutionary, and that's WordPress.com. There you go. For those of you that are watching, you can see that. And so we're going to dive into that and talk about new thoughts. And so Jim, welcome.
Thank you, Allie. It's great to be back with you again. And it's a beautiful day here in Lyon as well. So
Yeah, so tell us about life there. When did you move to France and why?
Well, we've been here full time for 7 years now. And why? Wow, because we fell in love with Europe, and we spent 3 years before we decided where to live traveling full time. We'd sold our home and cars and most of our possessions in California, and we traveled mostly in Europe and the Americas, Central America and so forth, and Canada and all over Europe. And about halfway through that, we said, let's find a home base. And we came to Lyon, and within a couple days, we knew this was where we wanted to stay. It sort of ticked off all of our boxes, if you will. And what I love about it here, the main thing is the French work they live to work. They don't. I'm sorry. They work to live. They don't live to work. And yet they take great pride in what they do. They're very productive. They're the highest productivity rate in Europe of their workers and output. But they know how to vacation. They get to take their 5 or 6 weeks a year. They close their businesses at lunchtime. Hardly anything's open on Sunday. It's just really they savor life, and we love that.
Yeah, I grew up in England until I was 14 and came to America at that point. And not that England and France are completely the same, but there is some similarities, and there's quite a stark contrast between the American mindset or the American work ethic, as far as 8 hours a day or longer. Overtime is encouraged sometimes. And there's less holidays or work days off than there is in England. And there does seem to be less of the emphasis on work and career and more of an emphasis on actually living and enjoying. So maybe... So what would you say that has been a shift for you coming from America, from the United States, to this different, slower culture as far as rushing and work ethic?
Well, I just one example. I used to be the person that always finished their meal first when I lived in the U.S. And here in France, I may still finish first, but everybody else eats so slowly that I've slowed down my eating greatly. And now when I visit the U.S., I'm the last person to finish. So just learning how to take time and savor food. And when you go to a French person's home for dinner, it's like 3 or 4 courses, but it's a course an hour. And you have time to talk and digest your food and so forth. It's not grab a sandwich and get back out on the road or something like that. So I would say that just that sense of savoring and taking time is something that a lot of Americans, when they come here, or even on vacation, they're uncomfortable with, because there's nothing to do on Sunday, everything's closed. Well, yes, because they take their time off, and half the things are closed on Monday, because everybody wants to have 2 days off. So it takes a little adjustment, but I really appreciate it. I appreciate that there's that sense of self-care, and there's that sense of savoir-faire, as they call it, which is to enjoy life.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm feeling that right now. I'm here on vacation, and I noticed there are long stretches of there's nothing to do, not being in your home and not having your normal sort of triggers around, well, I need to take care of this, or I need to do this, but you're away and you're not feeling those needs to do and to just be. And it takes the body a while and the mind a while to slow down enough to simply enjoy the moment or enjoy, the scenery. And yesterday I went on a 9-mile walk. I think that sort of got me into this, okay, get all that, energy out, because there's a lot to simply just take in, and to sort of break that normal habit or routine of doing and working and being in your familiar environment. And so there you are, you've been there for 7 years, and you've obviously adjusted and become sort of congruent with the flow of life there in France. What have been some of the things you've noticed as far as your work and your relationships? How have those changed since you've been in France?
Well, I'm officially retired, so I'm not going to a job every day like I was. I do a little bit of coaching. I do some writing. I do things like this. Occasionally, I'll speak virtually for a Sunday service or something. But my day-to-day life is really quite nice. I mean, there's a thing they talk about, a 15-minute city, where everything is within 15 minutes. And we live in our area of Lyon is a 3-minute city.
Oh.
Within a 3-minute walk, I have 6 boulangeries where I can buy baked goods and our baguettes every day. I have greengrocers, I have butcher shops, I have wine shops, I have fromageries for cheese and poissonneries for fish. They don't let the big supermarkets into the city. So the mom and pop shops all thrive. So we shop for our meals every day. We don't have a big refrigerator. We go out and, like we usually have salad or something like that for lunch with some cheese. And tonight we're having a roast chicken with potatoes that we bought at the outdoor marché yesterday. And, so it's that kind of a slow and easy, but, and it's very easy to eat very healthily here. Everything is fresh and salads. We have a greengrocer a block away that has, everything. You have fruit and vegetables and fresh yogurt and cheeses and all kinds of stuff. So that, just living day to day and getting out in the air and walking. We have a lovely park nearby. Dorian, as we were talking about before we went on there, is a violinist. So there's an amazing violin or chamber music community here. She's playing in a couple of orchestras as an amateur, and she has 2 concerts this weekend. And Saturday is the Festival of Music in France on the solstice every year. The entire country has music everywhere. So pretty much every restaurant will have music. There'll be concerts going on all over the city. Everything's free. It's just lovely. So you'll walk down the street and you'll hear music coming from here and music coming from there and so forth. And she and her orchestra are going to do a flash mob of Vivaldi's Four Seasons in a courtyard near one of the historic buildings here.
That
really
sounds
looking
fun.
forward to that. Yeah.
Well, I know that you are a social media poster on occasion. I'd love to see a video of that flash mob.
I will be there, so I'm sure we'll have one. I'm not sure how they're going to set up or anything, but it's going to be very hot. That's one of the issues. But
Oh, yeah. I noticed, speaking to social media, I noticed that you posted something, a map that was talking about the percentages of processed foods that different regions or countries consume on average. And I was astonished to see the numbers from the UK and the US in comparison to some of the countries that, like you're talking about, with all the local shops and grocers and butchers and what have you, that there's more of a tendency to eat fresh, organic, or I don't know about organic, but fresh foods and rather than processed foods. So
yeah, that was hyper processed foods, not just processed foods. So that's foods that there's a lot of chemicals and so forth in them. It's not just making bread where you have 3 or 4 different ingredients and you cook it. This is talking about the breakfast cereals and the processed luncheon meats and all that kind of stuff. And France was around 14% of the total average family diet, and the U.S. was 73 or 74%. So that's one of the benefits of not having the big supermarkets in town is you stay out of the middle of the supermarket. Where all the bad stuff tends to be, and you go around. When you go to this big supermarket, you go around the edges because that's where the fresh food tends to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's slide over to this blog that you've been creating. That I think 8-part series of blogs, and talk about this and what prompted you to share this at this particular time.
Okay, well, over the last several years, I've had the opportunity to speak at the convention or the conferences or conventions of CSL, Unity, and Anton. And, when you're in those environments, you have these wonderful, rich conversations with people. And, it gets me thinking about what is the basis of our philosophy and our theology. And just to clarify, philosophy would be the idea that there is a deity and maybe some definition of that deity. And theology would be, how do you relate to it? How do you get there? So a philosophy would be, for example, that Seattle exists. Okay, but if you've never been there, would you believe it? And so forth. And how do you get to Seattle? Well, you could fly, you could drive, you could take a boat. So those would be theologies about how to get to, the subject of the philosophy. And when New Thought began, late 1800s, early 1900s, it was basically set up as a bridge for people in spiral dynamics terms, which we've had a little bit of chat about, but sort of moving from traditional forms of religion to a more modernistic, individualistic approach to religion. So instead of seeing God as separate and up there and being judgmental and seeing God as kind of manipulating things in my life, we begin to see ourselves as having the agency, and that the best way to connect with God or Spirit, whatever term you want to use, is from within. And that God isn't manipulating our lives. Everything that could be created is already created as potential. And our role, my role, your role, my cat's role, is to actualize that potential into experience. And we actualize that potential out of an infinite field of potential. We actualize that according to our own, what we call consciousness, our belief systems, our expectations, so our psychology. Okay, and that was a really radical idea 100, 130 years ago. And we just had Western psychology beginning to emerge as a serious kind of a science. And people like William James and Freud was beginning to come into being, and later Jung would come along, and so forth. And science was, also making new developments and pushing things forward. And then after New Thought, or at the time New Thought was first emerging, in the say in 19 teens and 20s, you began to have quantum physics began to emerge, but nobody understood it. I mean, there wasn't anybody around that could say, oh, quantum physics, say in 1920, here's what quantum physics means and here's how we can apply it to understanding ourselves. Nobody really was able to do that. And even 100 and some years later, there's very few people that can really do that can really understand it. But quantum physics, as it's emerged and evolved over time, does have some value for us in terms of not getting into and understanding all the math and everything, but understanding some of the principles that have been discovered in the quantum physics that do apply to how the universe works, to how our reality works, to how our ability to use our mind to make changes in our lives, or to pray at a distance and have another effect on someone else, and so forth. There are clues coming into being that help us understand that better. So that was sort of the mindset that got me started on the idea of, let me see, what would it be like if we just sat down with, and I consider myself to have a blank slate, about what knowing what I know about New Thought and its various branches, and about quantum physics, and about psychology, and about some other topics, what would it look like? What would a philosophy and theology look like that was more current? Okay. So that was sort of the genesis of the thinking that led to it. Then a few months of thought went into it, and then I began to put it down on the computers, and I decided to launch it as a blog series. And it was too much for one post, and it turned into 8. So, and there probably could, it's one, this is the kind of thing you can talk about forever. So it's,
Right.
But that was kind of the genesis and what led to me producing the series, which is going to become a book now. I think that seems to be what's germinating within me. You say what wants to happen by means of me, that book seems to want to happen.
Yeah. As I read through each post, all 8 of them, I could see that, I personally wanted to go a bit deeper. I wanted to hear more from you. And so I guess that's, I had that hope, and you've just revealed that it in fact is going to happen. So that's beautiful. Um, so let's dive into a little bit of, as you explored this, theology and philosophy, and bringing in all of these aspects that have sort of evolved over the last 100 or so years since New Thought started to come on the scene. How does it blend together now with what you know and what you've experienced with, not only, I know you've written several books, you write, you've co-authored things, you mentor and teach. So what have you seen in the field as far as working with people and what what they're asking and what they're struggling with, and then how your thoughts are based on the information that you've studied and gathered?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that are, there's a number of topic areas we would go into. I think two that might inform our conversation here that would be appropriate to the time we have and so forth. One would be the idea that was held pretty much by all of the founders of New Thought, and continues to be held by a large number of the teachers of New Thought today and so forth, is that the way the universe works is entirely through cause and effect. And that's true scientifically at the level of classical physics, or what we call Newtonian physics. Everything that happens at the level of Newtonian physics, which is the level, say, above the subatomic level and beneath the cosmic level. So the stuff that happens to you and me every day does have a physical cause. If a pool ball rolls across a pool table, it means it was hit by something, maybe a pool cue or maybe a cat or something. But the ball doesn't just go by itself. There's some kind of physical cause. It may be a physical cause we can't see, whatever. It could be struck by lightning. It could be some kind of a wind or a force that comes into the room.
Earthquake.
But there's a cause, yeah. Whereas at the subatomic level, which makes up everything that we are, there is cause and effect, but there is also what's called pure randomness, or acausality, where things just happen. Where, within the atom, we used to, most of us studied atomic, what we know about the atom, usually we think of a mini solar system, with discrete electrons following around in an orbit around a discrete nucleus. And maybe we learned the components of those. But now we can actually take images of what an atom looks like, and what it looks like is a cloud with things flashing on and off. And what the flashing on and off is electrons being here, not being here, being here, being over here, not being there, being over here, not being there. And they said, well, that took a while to wrap scientists' head around. Now they know the nucleus does the same thing. It pops in and out of what we would call existence. And so this tells us that there's a lot of what we would call strangeness going on. That is the basis of our reality. It's not like you can say, well, that happens at a level I don't live at. Well, every part of your being and everything you interact with in the physical universe is made up of atoms, and atoms are quantum stuff. So we have to allow that there may be some things that happen that affect us at a more, say, human level, that are not due to cause and effect. That I get sick maybe, and I didn't have a series of negative thoughts last week. And because it's human nature to want answers to things. A lot of time we look for a religion to explain everything, and the best religion can do is admit that it can't. The best religion says, we don't know how this happens, but it happens. So let's enjoy it. Let's rejoice in it. Let's try to understand it as best we can. But there's always going to be an element of mystery in how things unfold. So how many times have people in New Thought over the last 100 years or so been told what's in your consciousness because something's not going well in your life, or you have an illness, or what about the age-old question: what about babies that are born with fill in the blank, cancer or HIV or whatever? And yeah, there are causes for most of that, but it's not necessarily a linear connection between a thought I had and an experience I'm having. There are other things that we interact with, including other people, and the effects of their thoughts and beliefs on us that we don't see. So when I thought about, well, what's the value in that? I mean, New Thought theology is a lovely thing, and we generally are wonderful people, and we're not hurting anybody we're not hurting anybody intentionally. We may be hurting people by not admitting we don't understand some things.
Right.
But what's the value in it? And to me, the value is what my understanding that there's more acausality or randomness in my experience and in yours is likely to make me more compassionate. Mm-hmm. Rather than, oh, look at, your life's falling apart. I'm judging you, in some way because what did you do that led to that? And even if you could explain what you did that led to that, which sometimes we can, but usually we can't because we don't even know what, our own beliefs because they're subconscious. So how can science help to inform us of a way of understanding reality with a capital R in ways that lead us to a greater understanding of ourselves, a greater understanding of others, and a greater willingness to be open to be compassionate and to be open to the mysteries that abound. And not, maybe part of growing up as a New Thought person would be losing the need or diminishing the need to have answers for everything. To me, that's a huge challenge for us. And what we see is, let's face it, we're going through the same stuff that the traditional religions are, and even though we are ahead of them theologically, we haven't kept up the pace. We're not New Thought anymore in the terms of being anywhere near the leading edge of understanding human psychology, human development, science, and the mystical. I saw a quote the other day. It said, mysticism doesn't need science, and science doesn't need mysticism, but we need them both. You see, because we need to recognize that science, as good, as useful as it is, can't explain everything, can only explain what can be measured. And mysticism, as useful as that is, can't explain, how to drive to the supermarket. So we need both. And how do we find a way to make space for that in our teachings? Especially in times that are changing as rapidly as our times are. And we're seeing the growing pains that humanity is going through, a lot of which is people feeling left behind by a culture and a society that it's too complex for them to keep up with. So they get angry and they try to pull everything back to what they can understand. And I think what we have in New Thought, this is not the opinion of the management, I don't think, but we have moved into a place of the second thing I want to talk about, which is that there is no personal God. And
well, let's take a really short break. We're here at the bottom of the hour. And so let's take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll jump into this second topic. See you in a minute.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center, Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Welcome to the Convention of the Americas 2025, Rising Together. Join us for a truly bilingual retreat experience on the shores of the beautiful Lake Chapala, Mexico. July 22nd through July 26th, 2025, at the Hotel Villa Monte Carlo in Jalisco, Mexico. Featuring Reverend Jeffrey Ryan, Dr. Jose de Lira Sosa, Reverend Dr. Kathy Ann Lewis, Reverend Dr. John Waterhouse, and Reverend Dr. David Bruner. Registration is now open, and payment plans are available. Simply visit www.conventionoftheamericas.com. Come be part of a transformative gathering with powerful presentations, workshops, networking time, and just good old relaxing and connecting. Plus, you can learn more about the science of mind and how to live this powerful philosophy in your life. Transform your life at Convention of the Americas 2025, Rising Together.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
And we're back with my guest, Jim Lockard. So someone said in the chat that we left it on a cliffhanger, and we did. I want to go back just a second to talk a little bit about where we are today. And as you were talking, I was considering that there's a lot of black and white thinking. People love to kind of make sense of things and put them in boxes and wrap it up neatly with a bow. And I'm sensing that this next evolutionary step is going to require more of a both and mindset. Like it's not just one way or another, but two things could be true at the same time. And there's sort of a blending of those two ideals or two truths, and that this kind of feels like evolution to me. There's a blending of things coming together, and this requires us, especially us as practitioners in science of mind, that it's going to require us to be a bit more curious and less certain about what we think we know, and you talked a lot about that there are more causes than are apparent. And I think of when a practitioner is doing treatment for someone or working with someone to help them move through a challenge or help them create something they're working on, that there's more of a fluidity to this new way of sort of being in the world and working with the laws to have the results that one wants. And it's not so fixed. Well, we do this and we get this result. There's a lot more nuance to it, and there's a lot more grace that can be and good that can be realized if we're not so fixed and black and white in our thinking. So do you have anything to respond to that idea of black and white, both and being a bit more curious about cause?
Well, I really like when I can explain things. Believe me. But I do also enjoy a curious situation where, well, what's this all about? And again, see, it gets back to what I would call psychological development and maturity. We have the same basic brains that we had when there were, a handful of us trying to be hunter-gatherers, and the biggest part of our day was deciding how to fill the hours when we weren't asleep and weren't eating. But the world, we have co-created a much more complex society. And that's really where most of the pressure comes. That's what the spiral dynamics is talking about, the levels of complexity that are required, in order to interact in larger and larger groups of people. So what happens is life gets more complex around us, and our primitively designed brains kind of run into that, and we try to find a way through. And there is some evolution of our brains that have happened over time, but not nearly as much as we have been able to evolve our society. So we look for black and white answers, and sometimes when we're in a lot of areas where they're just not there, which is everyday life, right? Should I say yes to this idea? Should I say no to it? So-and-so asked me out. Should I say yes? Should I ask so-and-so out? Should I buy this car? Should I, how much is in my bank account? There's all kinds of things going on, a lot of which we can quantify and a lot of which we can't. So it's developing that inner psychological sense of intuition, of being able to connect with the intuitive knowing, because there is a part of us at the very depth of our being that's a lot smarter than the part up here. And to align all of the levels of our mind, from the soul through the intuitive level, through the subconscious level to the conscious level, kind of so that there's a channel for us to be expressing and a channel for us to input in. So that's prayer and meditation in a sense. Meditation is listening to one side of the conversation, and prayer is speaking into the depths, because we do create that subconscious to a large degree by the way that we think consciously and the way that we feel emotionally. So to me, grace comes from the realization that there's a system within me and that surrounds me that is in my favor. And if I'm encountering a great deal of obstruction in my life, I'm probably in the way of that system to one degree or another. So what I don't want to do is become a victim, take a victim approach to that. And I also don't want to shut it down because I'm afraid of it. So to me, that's a real great thing that spiritual communities can do, is to create a support system for one another when we're having these inevitable struggles, however they manifest, emotionally, physically, financially, whatever, our struggles will manifest. And to have a support system to say, okay, you're going to get through this. This is, maybe think about this, or maybe think about that, or maybe just sit down and shut up for a couple of hours, whatever is needed. And that we can get a sense, like you mentioned, of being more open to possibilities rather than, I read a book, here's the 10 steps how to do this. One of my favorite jokes is there are 3 rules for writing the great American novel, but no one knows what they are. You see, so I would say there are 3 rules for living a perfect spiritual life, but no one knows what they are. But there's a lot of opinions. So what I have to do is look outside for these opinions, and the opinions I've gravitated to most are in the New Thought realm. But I also have to then say, okay, let my healthy self take each of these under advisement and see if it rings true And have I done the work of aligning myself to where I'll recognize it if it is true?
Right.
You know, a good
Exactly.
BS detector is essential for a spiritual person. Because,
Yes.
you know, how many of us are falling for the crap on Facebook and the fake memes and the fake news and, you know, and things like, you know, if you Googled it, you would realize in 10 seconds that you were looking at something that was at least controversial. But oh no, if it matches something especially if it matches a fear of mine,
Right.
I'm going to put it up, right? So that's what we have to grow out of. And the more complex the culture around us, the more that stuff gets thrown at us.
Yeah.
See? And the idea of cause and effect as the only operating device of the universe, to me, is insufficient for us to develop a response system to the world in which we find ourselves.
Beautifully
If that makes
said.
sense.
Yeah. All right. What was your second point that Raymond is saying it's a cliffhanger? What's the next thing?
Good old Raymond. I know. He and I are good buddies, so that's great. Well, the idea of what I'm going to call a personal deity or a personal God. A God that is outside of you, that is somehow responding to you or not, which is, you know, which is sort of like we all learn as little kids, most of us in our religious upbringing. I was raised Catholic, and you know, you prayed to Jesus, and Catholics have a corporate setup. They have, you know, the CEO God, they have the COO Jesus, they have Mary. They can't quite define her role, and then there's all these saints, and you're supposed to go to certain saints with certain problems, and they filter them up through, you know, little envelopes with string on them to God, and then God responds, and then they let you know, they feed back to you. It's a corporate structure. And what you learn is that you're being watched all the time. And you know, I remember one of my lessons that I was told was, if a leaf falls off a tree, God decided that that leaf should fall off that tree at that moment. Okay, that's probably to me the most extreme form of what I call God the micromanager. And I will speak from a religious science viewpoint at this point, because that is my science of mind. That is I'm most aware of that one in New Thought. There are some differences among the New Thought families in this idea. Holmes talked about spirit, God being love and law. And law is how it was basically, in his mind, cause and effect. Okay, now I would say let's add pure randomness in there too, at least an element of it. And if I were redoing it today, I wouldn't use the word love because what he describes love as, and we get love as an emotion primarily to us, but he's describing love as the intelligence and the energy that animates the universe. You see? So if that's the case, maybe life would be a better word. That everything that exists in the universe has an intelligence within it. Quantum physics also says that beneath the quantum field, which is the field of all energy, there is a thin layer of intelligence. And that way that intelligence acts on the field itself creates disturbances in the field, and you and I are disturbances in the field. The intelligence that is you, the intelligence that is me, can use the field to create, for example, the bodies we inhabit. You know, and change out atoms by the billions every second, and you know, go through all the things. Imagine trying, if you had to, with your conscious mind, assemble your body cell by cell, right? But we know there's an inner wisdom that knows how to do that. See, that to me is what Holmes calls love and what I would call life. And that's impersonal. It's not, if I pray to God, am I asking God to do something differently than God was going to do anyway? And does that even make sense? Or am I praying for me to change my alignment or my relationship with the deepest knowing and the energy flowing through my being to have a different manifestation? see. So if it's to be, it's up to me, is sort of the thing that kind of captures that idea. And that God, in a sense, set everything in motion, and as Thomas Troward said, became part of that motion, became part of what it created, and what it created became part of it. It. Not he, not she, it. And so everything, and if we believe that spirit or God is infinite, then you can't add anything to an infinite. So everything has to be created already. But it can be in different forms, which is why the physical universe was necessary. Otherwise, we could have just stayed all spirit. That would have been, why not? Well, apparently, at some level, something, whatever it is, said, I want more. And we still have that in us, right? I want more. That's a very common thing. But what it did was, it allowed us to say, okay, now we have the field of pure potential, which concludes everything possible, and we have the field of actualized experience, which is my life and your life and my cat's life and the life of every entity in the universe. Even if we don't call it alive or sentient, it has intelligence to actualize atoms and so forth into some form or shape that changes over time. That make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So everything that I could possibly need to be fulfilled as the being that my soul wants me to be, and my soul is the deepest part of my individualized self, and it will accept nothing less than the best I can be, the most I can be. So that's the creative urge, right? Joseph Campbell said human beings are protoplasm with an urge, And so what my soul says is, that's the constant reminder inside. I could be doing this. I could be helping more. I could be learning more, Not necessarily the busyness, but the urge to be fulfilled. All that's there. And then my mind, my psychological structure, is the vehicle by which it's actualized. Or something else is actualized. It's not my best.
Mm.
So that's why you can actualize something that you don't like at all, or you can actualize something that does fulfill you. And it's our emotional set and our mental set that determines what we're more likely to actualize out of this infinite realm of possibility. So Hitler could have actualized the way Mother Teresa did, and vice versa. But their own psychological set indicated they would go in a different direction.
Mm-hmm. So what about free will? Because I know that we all have the ability to focus on what we want, make decisions, have opinions on this or that. And so I see there's a difference between traditional Christian religions and New Thought, in that there's more of an emphasis within New Thought on free will and how we've manifested the life that we've manifested and the way we pray. There's more of a less within Christianity. There's more of it, God's will be done, and then an acceptance. But with us, it's like it seems like New Thought is a more engaged in this free will and sort of a more of a manipulating. I mean, that's a harsh term, but trying to govern or
Right.
to be, direct the God energy, the prayer, the treatment into a specific outcome. And I think that can be hard for people when things don't end up manifesting or being realized the way they want. And then, based on our free will, then the blame comes back to us that we didn't have the consciousness and so when you add in this, you're talking about, the internal sense of presence versus the external. So how do we reconcile wanting what we want, treating for what we think is best for us, but then the randomness of things showing up in a very radically different way? And I would say it as, well, I think there's a song or a term, you don't always get what you want, but you get what you need, or something like that. So
Yeah.
there's more of a, I'm sensing this whole blog series is about becoming more relaxed with the way life does show up, knowing that there's more at play than just, you directing your thought in a particular, with wanting a particular outcome. And there's more of a accepting the mysterious, being more accepting of the way things materialize. So what's the next step for us as new thoughters in working in a more nuanced, graceful way with what we're understanding based on current, what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, to speak just for a second about free will, I don't think there is a big difference between Christianity and New Thought in terms of our understanding of free will. I think we both recognize that we have to direct our experience to some extent. But the difference is, where is my locus of control? In Christianity, and again, this is a generalization, and in many, to say in many parts of the world, in terms of societies and religions, there's a belief that the power is outside of me, that there's something external to me that I have to please or supplicate or somehow reach and convince to give me good. Okay? When I was a little kid, I would pray for a red bicycle, and just figured God wasn't giving me one today, but he'll give me one tomorrow, maybe, that kind of thing. And in New Thought, the way that shows up, the locus of control in New Thought, once we get it, is that it's within us. See, you bring the power within you and recognize that's where it is. But I still hear a lot of people saying, oh, this is what Spirit wants for me. Spirit wants me to take that job. Spirit wanted me to go through this negative experience. And my point would be, Spirit doesn't even know what happened to you. All right? And the kind of way, the allegory for that, if you will, is I don't know any single cell in my body. Not one. I don't, there's not a single cell that I can identify because they're too small, and many of them are hidden. But I really wish the best for all of them. I want the liver cells to be really good liver cells, and I want the skin cells to be really good skin cells, and whatever it is. So I have a general sense that I want them to have what they need and be fulfilled and carry out their mission. And I would say maybe it's something like that the deity feels toward us, but not a sense of this manipulating or micromanaging anyone's life, or saying, oh, Allie can have that, but Allie can't have that. That, to me, that's up to Allie. Other than the way we're created, I can't be a star in the NBA. Okay, you could say that's God ordained, but I would say that's genetics. That's just, genetics maybe plus opportunity, or whatever. But God didn't say, oh, when Jim's born, he can't play in the NBA, because he doesn't have the physical stature or whatever, or athleticism or whatever it is. I don't think that's the way it works. I think the way it works is we all have this field of infinite potential that we are connected to, and that whatever aspects within that field resonate to us personally, that's what we can manifest. We can actualize. Some of it's positive and some of it's negative. And then the other field of effect is what's outside of us. Like running into you. The benefits of that, that I didn't create that. I responded to it. I responded to it from who I saw myself to be in the moment. Right? So somebody watching this particular broadcast could be saying, oh, I really resonate with this, and there's things here I can take away and really connect with because there's a resonant field about what's being discussed. And there are people who say, oh my God, more of this woo-woo shit, and let me turn on the tractor pull. Because we're different, and we actualize according to our emotional and mental set at the moment. And not to condemn any of that, it's just the way it is. You know, when I was in my 20s, I couldn't have resonated to this conversation. I wasn't there yet. I was somewhere else. And so should I be condemned for that? No. I mean, that's just the way it was. So the thing to me in understanding psychology, the philosophy of our teaching, of the nature of the spirit, and the theology of the teaching as to how I choose to be in relationship to it, I do recognize that what I need to have the best possible understanding from the best possible teachers of what's come before me, and then I have to get myself into the best psychological and emotional health possible so that I can be a mature player. I can be an adult in this play of life. I can have a good resonance between my soul's agenda and what I'm thinking about in my conscious mind. I'm not self-sabotaging, so I'm not creating limitations where there don't need to be limitations. And also, so I'm not doing things that would be crazy for me to do. You know? So it's sort of, is there free will? Yes. And there's a lot of programming that goes on, a lot of conditioning, a lot of societal conditioning. And that's part of why we go to spiritual community, is to get conditioned into that particular teaching. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I think left to ourselves, if you're a baby and you're like living ferally, I don't think you're going to be a very spiritual human being in the sense of having a true sense of understanding of your own potential and who you are. You might live a fine life, but you know, the question is, am I living the most fulfilling life I can live? And the more I've been steeped in this kind of thinking, the more I recognize that that has to contain a significant amount of contribution to others.
Yeah. Well, we're right here at the end, and I'd love to continue this conversation.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So what's in just like a couple of words, a sentence, what's the message you want to leave with our guests today?
The most important thing you can do for yourself and others is to develop the best version of yourself and get really clear and radically honest about what that is. Which means I think when you get connected with that, you're going to be kind, but you're not going to suffer fools gladly. You're going to have healthy boundaries. You're going to be supportive of people where that's appropriate, and you're going to be willing to be rigorously truthful with people, even at times when they may not want to hear that. I think all that's part of compassion. So what I've loved about being in the New Thought and the way I've been in it, it's been a journey of personal development. And I think we're at a time where other fields, including science and psychology, can help us add to the quality of that kind of experience for people that are coming into the teaching now.
Beautiful.
That's basically it.
Thank you, Jim. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I know that our viewers will get a lot out of what you've shared today. And I look forward to having you back at some time in the future. So blessings and love to you. And
thank you so much.
Thank you to everyone who's watching here, and many blessings to you right where you are. And I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge.